Hey, really glad you joined. And we did a Q&A last month that was super popular. So I thought we'd try another one. And thank you for sending in your questions. So the first one is I was raised by narcissists, and now I'm afraid I will become one myself. Can you help me? Well, first of all, if you're asking the question, am I a narcissist or will I become one? You're not a narcissist. Narcissists don't know they're narcissists, and they would never admit they were narcissist, even if they were wondering if they were to become one or if they are one. So you have that going for you. And a lot of us that are empathic, that have come from abuse or are survivors of toxic systems, often ask that question, well, am I a narcissist? But honestly, if you're asking yourself that question, no, you're not a narcissist. And I know that term is thrown about really quite easily, especially these days. But no, you're probably an empathic being trying to look within to make yourself a better human being and a more compassionate human being. So that's my quick answer to that question. And thanks for asking it. Um, why is meditation important if you've come from or are in an abusive system? Wow, great question. Um, so I was first introduced to meditation back in the 90s by a therapist that I was speaking with, and I couldn't understand, the purpose of it. We met for a half a day workshop in her small studio apartment in New York City, and it was absolute agony. When we did have little 20-minute sessions of silence, because back then I thought that my mind and my being was supposed to be perfectly quiet, perfectly silent, um, with no thoughts at all. And my head was buzzing. The noise was so loud. I was so uncomfortable, and trying to sit still for even 5 minutes back then was terror. So it was really a long time to learn that that's not the goal of meditation. Yes, quiet the mind, but there's no way you can still the mind unless you're some kind of enlightened master. And even enlightened masters only have a split second of stillness of the mind completely with no thoughts. So and there's lots of different ways to meditate, especially those of us that have experienced abuse or toxicity. It can come in all forms. It can come in moving meditation. You can eat and meditate while you're eating. It can come from, looking at the sky as you're walking. It can come from gardening. And these days I'm back to formally sitting on a cushion, but it's not with the intent of silencing my thought. It's with the intent of getting still and allow my body to have stillness and to feel the peace of that. And then to note the sensations in my body and the thoughts that come through the mind, because oftentimes when you are in a toxic system or you've come from one and you've survived a toxic system, the central nervous system is highly activated. It's very difficult for you to feel any kind of real tranquility because you're on edge, you're on guard, you're waiting for the next shoe to drop, or you're wondering what's going to happen next. So it's really hard to get quiet and to feel stillness and to connect inside your own heart, your own being. And there's lots of faulty messaging that comes through. And that's what meditation for me has helped me get in touch with just how much extraneous noise there is going on inside of my body, and actually taking note and actually meditating has helped me turn down the volume on that external and internal cacophony, um, and really get with the present moment, with really what is, because I'm no longer in that toxic system, but I recreate it out of familiarity. And meditation gives me that moment of pause that I can note, oh, yeah, I'm back in my family home. I'm waiting for the punishment to come. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then I have to say, yeah, no, I haven't been in that home for decades. I'm not there anymore. I'm, in this present moment, I'm sitting on this cushion for me and watching these thoughts. And these are just thoughts and emotions. And then I can note my breathing. And when I note my breathing, that gives me some kind of tranquility, especially when I'm doing the box breathing or the heart centering breathing, the one where you take the short breath in, you hold it for a moment, and then you let it out longer than you inhaled. So the exhale is longer than the inhale. And then you pause at the end of that exhale. And then you take another short breath in and continue that same cycle for 6, 10, 12 times, whatever. There's no rules with this. Please know that. No rules with meditation. Really, there aren't. But that immediately calms the central nervous system. And for me, as an abuse and trauma survivor, that's what I'm looking for. And I need it multiple times a day when I can recognize and be aware of it. So these are some of the ways that meditation has really helped me um, get with my current moment rather than relive my past trauma, or worse, expect it, just automatically being expectant of it. And there's a lot of triggering of that today as our systems are collapsing, as our dynamics are changing, as we see the veil coming off of what we just followed for decades, just like we may have followed blindly in our families or in the workplace or in our relationships without asking too many questions or without taking into account how we really feel inside our own hearts and beings. And meditation really allows one to do that. It allows you to go inside your body. We're taught to live externally. We're taught to get accolades from the outside in to be worthy and to receive. And that's false. That's false evidence appearing real. That's living from a place of fear. And meditation can help detonate some of that fear that we're so trained into, because the truth is so far away from that fear. And the meditation has given me the clarity to see through that. And again, it comes in many forms. It can come through walking, as long as I'm just cognizant of taking the steps and what I'm seeing and noting, oh, I'm looking down at the pavement again when I have all this beauty if I just lift my head. So I hope that answers your question. And I really encourage you to keep up a meditation practice, whatever that means. And there are no rules or regulations. Most of us have put way too many rules or measuring sticks to live up to. So be gentle, with yourself and be kind and as loving as you can. And I will say from personal experience, meditation will definitely move you to a really different place of living and hopefully eventually to a place of authentic self-compassion and self-love, which is genuinely a bit challenging for those of us who have come through abuse or are in abusive situations. And then suddenly things become much more clear. There's a lot more clarity of how we're living, and we're seeing our belief systems, and we're seeing through the faulty ones, the ones that really don't belong to us and may have gone way back in our ancestry if you really take a look at it. And it may be something you're carrying that doesn't belong to you that you can drop. So, yeah, encouraging you to continue your good work with meditation, and hope that helps with your question. Oh, this is a good one. I'm sure a lot of us can relate to this. Receiving is hard for me, almost painful. Why and how may I move through this? Ooh, this is loaded, right? So, um, oftentimes you don't feel worthy of receiving good, and you expect the bad things to happen, and you hold on to the negativity so you're not surprised and disappointed. And that's a painful old belief and a faulty belief that you feel may keep you safe. So receiving is the antithesis of all that. And we may have been trained out of believing we were worthy of receiving. In my family, it was almost considered, wrong to receive, because what about the others? And then guilt was added to the receiving, and you felt like you should hide any goodness. And there was a lot of comparison going on. And it's the same way in the workplace. If you receive an accolade, you might have, a flag on your head for somebody to attack you in a toxic system. And it can bring up great fear. So there can be fear around receiving, and a sense of danger for someone who's in an abusive and toxic system, or has been trained into one, or has come from one. And so again, it's a process. It's a process of allowing. It's a process of letting yourself feel safe with receiving. And it comes in small little bites. For me, I've had to put a hand on my heart and say, it's okay. It's okay to receive a compliment from someone. I used to just push them away or deflect the compliment from me and project it back out onto the other person, or immediately compliment them for something similar, rather than take it in, because taking that in was excruciating. I felt unsafe. I didn't feel worthy. I thought I'd be punished. I thought it was a trick. I didn't trust it. And now I've made it a practice, when I realize that I'm receiving some kind words from someone, I take them in. And also, when I extend kind words to someone else, I mean them from my heart. And so when I receive kind words from someone else, because I've sent them out with love, I'm starting to feel that love and trust the kind words coming back. So it's been a practice of feeling safe, of reminding myself it's okay to receive. I'm okay. And it goes not just with kind words, but with gifts, right? You may not feel comfortable receiving a gift. You may feel like now you owe a gift in return. And to stop down and say, hey, the universe is sending me this gift through this individual or institution or whatever it may be. And I'm going to accept it. I'm going to accept it and it's okay. And then as you add these experiences together, you start to feel safe with abundance and you start to be able to return the abundance to others. So it's this beautiful chain that's created. And you realize that it's okay and that you do have value and you do have worth. And your generosity increases as a result, and your happiness starts to blossom, and you start to live in a new zip code. And what I mean by that is, yeah, not just literally, although it can mean literally, but emotionally, you are living in a different place when you're able to receive. And then these seemingly miracles start to manifest. You start to receive reimbursement checks out of nowhere, or, you know, I don't know, someone gives you exactly what you desired that morning and it comes in, and it's a result of becoming open to receiving. And that faulty system you had in place where it felt unsafe, or it was coming from a place of tit for tat. When you'd receive, you felt like, oh, now I'm obligated, and you almost didn't want to receive, or you feared people being jealous or coveting, or that punishment for the attention. All that starts to dissolve. And you're giving from a cup that's starting to become full rather than a cup that's empty. So try that little exercise the next time someone gives you a compliment, a small compliment. Take it in and say thank you, and then try to be silent. Don't give the compliment back right away. Receive it. Take it in fully and experience what you feel inside. And watch the emotions that may not belong, those emotions of guilt or shame or discomfort. Just watch them come up and then watch them dissolve. And you'll see the magic of receiving. And you'll know that you're worthy and you're deserving. Okay. It's been hard for me to see abuse. Why is this? Wow, I love this question. And it is a little painful because so often when we're trained into a toxic system or we've experienced abuse, we can't see that it is abuse because we don't know anything different, or we've been gaslit. So we've been made to think this is normal and that we're the ones that are in the wrong for thinking this isn't okay. Or you've been told that you don't talk and you don't tell about the abuse, about the violence, about the toxicity. You're shamed. You're forced into believing that you owe your allegiance and your obedience to the toxic system. So it's very, very understandable, especially when you've grown up in these systems, to believe them because you have nothing to compare it to. And you also may have a belief, especially if you're an empath, that you can fix it, that you can fix your abuser, that if you're just kind enough or gentler enough, or open your heart more, that they will shift and they will change. Or you want to go along with it because you don't know how to be safe otherwise. And as a child, that's often the case. So it's quite understandable that as a child, certainly, and as an adult, absolutely, after you've been trained this way, to not even see clearly when someone is abusing you. Oftentimes, it helps to share what you're concerned with another trusted confidant. It could be a friend, it could be, a mentor, a therapist, a coach, but to share it and to check it out and to talk it through. And you don't have to stand for the abuse. You can say no, and no is a complete sentence. Oftentimes now I'll go to my body because as an empath, I feel a lot in my body, and my body is so bright. It's so intelligent. And I denied it for so long, that intuitive voice, or just the sensations, the tightness in the chest, the shallowness of my breath, my shoulders creeping up to my earlobes. Those are all signs for me to be aware of that something's not okay with me. And I have to stop down and I have to recognize and acknowledge those bodily somatic reactions to the scenario, because you know what? Maybe something's not okay. Maybe someone did share something that was inappropriate. And maybe I can say, that didn't feel good with me. I need to think about that for a moment, or end the conversation politely and then check it out with someone else. These are really hard things for us to do when we're so used to low self-worth and esteem, poor boundaries, porous boundaries, and horrific punishments as children. We don't know any better. We don't realize that we have a beginning, middle, and an end, and our bodies and our beings are sovereign. And I know it's a lot to take in, and it is a process, and it gets better and better. Most of us are so mute, our throats get really tight when we're in a scenario that is just not right. And we can see it, we can feel it, but we may not be able to speak about it in the moment. This all gets better as you go through transformative processes to move through the abuse. And you start to be able to see things more clearly. It's almost like, a gauze gets ripped off your eyes and you can finally see through the energy of, say, predator and victim, of narcissist and empath. And you get to the point where you won't even engage in it anymore. But when you're at that point where you really can't see through the abuse, I really strongly recommend that you get some help with it, because it is a learning process to identify it. Writing also helps about the scenario, but really talking it through with a trusted advisor, confidant, professional is really important to change the patterning and to know that you're safe to speak up and address it, which is really hard for us, but you can do it. And then it becomes much more natural as you acclimate to it. So I really encourage you to get help identifying the abuse and drawing appropriate boundaries and practicing good self-care around it because you're worthy. Oh, I'm new to all this. What are some of the signs in adulthood that you've been traumatized as a child? Woo! There are many. I'll just speak for myself personally. So I knew growing up something was awry in my household, very awry. But I buried it after I left and just did the best I could coping. But I felt like I was missing some of the tools or some of the handbook for living life. And what happened was by my early 20s, I saw enough red flags coming up. So a lot of the same behaviors that I saw demonstrated in my own household that I swore I would never repeat were repeating in my own adulthood. I was using alcohol to assuage my pain. I was getting into abusive relationships. I was having outbursts of anger that seemed uncontrollable. And I wasn't feeling safe. I was feeling very unworthy and yet angry. So I was experiencing depressions. And luckily, I got help and we went right into the trauma of my childhood. And believe me, I didn't want to go back in the house when the therapist suggests we go there. But anyway, that was the beginning. But some of the ways that my childhood trauma comes up today is when I start rushing around. I mean, really rushing around, like my life depends on it. Like I've got to get so much done or else. This is a huge sign of my childhood trauma coming up, that rushing. The central nervous system gets activated, and I feel all the past trauma come flooding back in. And it's not just from my childhood, it's way back in the lineage, it's ancestral. That energy comes flooding through, and it's a real signal now today. When I start rushing, I know I'm not in my being. I'm not discerning who I am in this moment. I'm playing out some kind of energy from the past that does not belong to me any longer. So rushing is one of the signs for me. And then I have perfectionism. Some of us have the opposite, but mine manifests in perfectionism. So all the I's have to be dotted, the T's have to be crossed, nothing can be out of place. God forbid, I turn in a work assignment and the client doesn't like it, the perfectionism is also a sign that I am triggered by past trauma. And I'm not living as a human being who's fallible, who can make mistakes. I'm not living with compassion. I'm living with perfection. And that's a red flag. You may experience it too. Procrastination, I don't have that one. Again, I have the opposite. So I'm a doer. But some of us really struggle with procrastination because we don't want to feel the agony and pain of not being enough. So we leave everything sort of go and don't address it until we absolutely have to, or it causes issues. So procrastination can be another sign of abuse and childhood trauma. Um, Overachievement. So again, getting all your accolades from the outside in. And I know so many of us have lived this way and were trained this way. How many of us heard in school we had to have all A's to be okay? You know, so many are going to college, double major, double minor, interning and working full time. You know, it's just inhuman, this overachievement. um, Endurance athletics, you know, to the point of being brutal to your body. Um, you know, having a perfect home or what looks like a perfect home, having your offspring look a certain way and act a certain way, or, you know, having to win every award in your division at work, or you're a zero. So overachievement and having ties into the perfectionism, but it can also be a sign that you're tied into a toxic system, because that's not being a human. That's being something else that really doesn't exist, or we wouldn't be here. Obsessed with your own child's safety can also be a sign that you've experienced your own childhood trauma. And I certainly had this. God forbid my son would get 2 feet away from me, especially when he was younger. And I was just traumatized and terrified. You know, I really held him back from engaging. I think it was in 5th grade, they had overnight science camp for, I think it was 3 nights. They went on a bus. I was terrified. I thought, how could he go away when, you know, most families had their children, you know, walking home from school. I would never let him walk home from school. I mean, we did live in a major metropolitan area, but I was so overprotective. You know, I would not allow it because I was so terrified, and I would never allow him to spend alone time with either of my parents. We didn't see them that often, but the terror inside me was so great. There was no way. And sometimes it wasn't even that I could put a finger on it, you know, really touch back to the incident and why I was so fearful. It just was inherent in the fabric of my being. So my son really suffered from that, I guess, if you could say suffered, because I was very protective. But that does come from past trauma. And I'm even feeling it may have gone deeper than what I experienced in my own home growing up, that there was more trauma that needs to be uncovered myself. So I'm working on that. But that is definitely a sign that you may have experienced your own childhood trauma when you're so protective, super protective of your own offspring. So it's something to take a look at. And it can be eye-opening. Hypervigilance. So in my home, you never knew what was going to happen from one moment to the next. And there were never any solid rules that really stayed, you know, really stuck. So when you don't know what's going to come through the front door and what kind of mood that person is going to be in, when there's a lot of violence within the home, or there's violence within the workplace, you know, oftentimes people have a boss that just explodes in tirades, and they don't know why. Or in school, you know, they have a professor or a teacher that is a certain personality and then flips, so they don't know what to expect. And you can become hyper vigilant, so you're at the ready. You're never really calm. Again, that central nervous system is on overdrive. You don't know how to relax. You don't know how to feel safe. And usually your breathing is stilted. So that can come from living within a toxic system. And it's something that needs to be addressed in treatment, or, with a trusted confidant or within a group, because it takes so much of your energy away that can go elsewhere. That's the thing. These signs of childhood trauma can suck so much life away from us, and we're not really living fully because we're stuck in the past and we don't know it. So if you've recognized any of these signs within yourself, bravo. And I really encourage you to take a look at them, to be brave enough to take a look at them, hopefully with someone else, but because you have so much life to live. I didn't understand how beholden I was to the toxic systems. I didn't know. And again, it is living in a new zip code when you start to take a look, when you start to gain the courage to break away and to live from a different place. There's magic that happens. I love to isolate. How do I break out of this cycle after abuse? Well, it can be painful. And I know trust, friendships, relationships, it can be really difficult when you have been abused or come from that toxicity. And it's really a process to allow yourself to trust again, and to allow yourself to break out of that isolation. And I like to call myself an introvert with an extrovert's halo, because most people wouldn't know I'm an introvert really until they got to know me, because I can go to any gathering and you'll think I'm your best friend. I can go up to anybody and speak to them and start the conversation and engage. But my goodness, I love to go late and leave early because it is exhausting for me to engage, and I have to come home and sort of regroup and give myself time to recover after engaging, because my preference is isolation as well. You know, Growing up, my best friends, my confidants, they were all my pets. They're all my kittens or my dogs. And it's taken me time and it's taken me practice. So, what helped me most get out of the isolation? Well, I got clean from addiction and I went to those meetings with A's on the back of them for many years. So, that really helped me get out of isolation because I didn't have a choice. I had to engage with other people. But sports, there's a lot of, walking groups and marathoning groups and triathlon groups and Tough Mudder runs, and there's hiking groups, all those kinds of things. Going to a gym and taking a class. That's how I started to break that isolation. And for me, it was really engaging in group sport. It was going to those meetings. And then it was meditation. And I would go to week-long meditations. I became part of a meditation group. So really, it was identifying what activities I could find tolerable and then find ways to engage. And I would have to force myself sometimes. And I worked alone too. Most of my career, I worked from home, or I worked on my own. So I really had to force myself to engage and force myself to connect by phone, with other people. So now it's so easy to hide behind the text. So when I see myself doing it, I'll make a date to make a phone call with somebody and really connect. Or, I'll make a date to go on a walk or a hike with someone, and force myself to do it, because otherwise I'm just in the bubble. COVID was fun for me. It was easy. I knew exactly how to keep myself isolated, but it doesn't really help in the long run build a system of support. And that's so important for us, especially as we come out of these toxic systems and learn how to live differently, learn how to live from a place of authenticity from within ourselves. And it's engaging with others that I learn about myself, about my likes and my dislikes, about my preferences. So I hope those tips helped on the isolation. It's so normal to want to isolate, especially after abuse, but you owe it to yourself to break the cycle. Go to that workshop that you're curious about. Go to the corner store and strike up a conversation with the checkout clerk. Like, it can be that simple. But I'm just really encouraging you to do it, because a lot of times when we're isolating, yeah, we're talking to the wrong individual, and we may be seeing with skewed perspective. So I hope that that really helps. What's been your biggest contributor to shifting out of abuse and into freedom? Ooh, yeah. So freedom felt, I didn't even know what freedom was. I think it was in 2013, someone suggested, wouldn't it be better to live in freedom? And I was like, freedom? Like, who has time for freedom? I'm busy hustling. I'm trying to keep my family afloat. Freedom. What is that really? And it's been a slow process to understand how tied into toxic and abusive systems I really was in many areas of my life, and how that felt natural. And I think it's part of being a human being. I think that's part of this system of duality. And to wake up out of that and to really see, oh yes, you can live heaven on earth. You can live in freedom, has been, a long process, but one that comes in drips and drabs and is been quite miraculous. And I really encourage you to it, just to sit for some time with that word and really experience what that really means for you. And for me, what I found is that freedom has come from honoring that still small voice that has been with me since I'm a little one, that beautiful heart space that I have within, that's been muddied and duct taped over and glued and gone around with the crowd, and really get to know her and go inside, because that's my power and she's my freedom. And if I would have listened to that voice for a long while, I think I would have been in a much different place, even though I appreciate the place I'm in now, because I'm in much more freedom than I've ever been. And I am living in a different zip code. I mean, literally and figuratively living from a different zip code. So really, it's been experiencing self-love. And I think I've shared this before. There's a meditation and spiritual teacher. His name is Matt Kahn, Kahn. And I started listening to him years ago, and he encourages you to put a hand on your heart and say, I love you. And believe me, I never wanted to go with that stuff. You know how they say, look in the mirror and say, I love you? It was just like, ick, ick. Honestly, that is a profound key to freedom. Just practicing those I love yous internally to yourself, and then practicing I love you with others. There's oftentimes I'll hear someone talk and my hand goes to my heart and I start saying, I love you. And I'm saying it to myself and I'm saying it to them. That has been key to freedom and to really living differently. to stepping outside of the abuse and really knowing a different place. And the other thing that I have to say for me, and this rattles some people, but I've had to completely drop victim mode completely. And I've experienced some really difficult scenarios and stuff, but I've had to drop the word victim and the experience of victim. I mean, God knows I'm human. I've sat in victim. I've been resentful as heck. I've felt entitled to rage and hatred, but ultimately I've had to drop that rule. And I've surrendered to the concept that I came here for a variety of experience, and that what I move through is experience for the sake of experience. And that has been so freeing, because then what I've walked through has turned into some type of gift of soul evolution, a positive change. And it's almost like I dropped that tar, that ick, that imprisonment, that barbed wire turned inwards. It unwraps and it lays down on the ground, and I walk away like a brilliant, glowing in freedom. And it's helped me with aging, and it's helped me stay flexible in my body, and it's helped bring amazing opportunities that I've said yes to. And believe me, it's so hard. It's so hard for some of my clients. It's so difficult to drop the scenario when it seems so stacked in one direction. Believe me, I don't want to live in the bodysuits of some of the people that have been my biggest perpetrators. But I see what I've experienced and walked through as a result as amazing and profound gifts of healing. And I can see how it's healed through the generations. Like some of my grandparents, my great grandparents have experienced similar things, but maybe didn't walk through the ultimate gift. I believe, that I stopped the child abuse with my own son. I believe I stopped it because I behaved much differently with my own son than has gone on through our lineage. And these are the gifts. These are the gifts of these experiences that we've been blessed with in this place of duality. And it's not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. I think you have to have an advanced degree to even get access to this planet. But I really believe that we are all here, all of us, ultimately to bring love and to teach love and to live in love. And I know that's an oxymoron, especially when you are sitting there realizing what you've been through. I get it. Me too. But the more I hang on to that rage and hate and eat that poison, thinking it's at the expense of the victimizer, the more I hold it in my body, the more I block myself off, the more I repeat the horrendous behavior. And the more that lineage of anger, rage, and abuse continues. So it's stopping here with me. I'm dropping it. And I'm so much happier, and my life is richer as a result. And I want to really encourage you to do the same. And it's not easy, and do not do it by yourself. There are so many that just try to ascend, out of these horrendous toxic scenarios without walking through the steps. There is a process to walk through, to release the rage and the anger, to acknowledge it. There are so many that just don't acknowledge it. Oh, I'm a more spiritual person. I'm a more highly evolved person. Yeah, fluff that. You're a human being, and you have rage and anger and jealousy and hatred and all that stuff. And it still comes up. The difference is, I can see it. I can see my behavior now. Before I couldn't see it, but I can see my reactions. I'm in touch with my feelings and how those feelings create my emotions. And I'm aware when I'm happy, sad, mad, and glad. Whereas when I started, I really wasn't. I was like a walking robot. So it does take quite a bit of work to move through it, but it is possible. And this stuff is coming up now in spades for all of us. Some say it's the way the planets are aligned astrologically, all these retrogrades causing us to look back. But I think it is with point and with purpose. And if you need help, help is here. It's never been a better time. And there's more of us coming forward, talking about it, acknowledging it, recognizing it. So there's some free tools on my site, susangold.us. You're welcome to go there. And I really encourage you to schedule a free Taste of Freedom session with me so we can move through some of this stuff together, because you are not alone in this. Okay, we have one more question. Oh, I think we had this question last time. How can I really create change within my own family system? Things seem to continually stay the same. Good question. So it may seem like things bounce back and are the same, but once you're cognizant of the toxicity and acting out that toxicity within your own family system, you do have a choice. And some of us are terrified. It brings up so much fear to stand up and to step out of the system. For me, I had to take a period of separation to really get grounded and to move through the toxicity, so I could really understand it and I could identify the triggers and I could respond differently. And it is possible. And once you have those steps within the fabric of your being, when you do fall prey to the same familiar abuse, you recognize it and you shift the behavior. And then ultimately, you don't even step into it anymore. Or if you do, it's momentarily and you know exactly where you are and you shift it. So it is possible to really create authentic change within your toxic system. And sometimes that means flat out walking away from it, period. So I hope that helps. This has been amazing. It's so nice to connect this way. I'll do it again in the near future. If you do have questions, send them in. I'll continue to post shorts and shorter weekly videos here on the channel. If you have topics you'd like to cover, let me know in the comments below. And I think that's it. But just know that you are incredible. You're a gift. You have point, you have purpose, and you have reason to be here. And we can walk through anything because we are in this together. Take good care.